What's up, Desktopers? Xavier Wills here for Desktop Bodybuilding, and in this video I'm discussing Bob Cicherillo calls out Fouad Abiad and Fouad responds, plus Phil Heath, Shawn, George Farah and many other top names, plus the fans react and have their say. All that plus much more coming up in this video, guys. I hope you enjoy it. What's up, Desktopers? Now, before I get into this one, I want to encourage you guys, if you guys like and appreciate this content, please give this video a thumbs up, smash that like button, also subscribe and hit the notification bell button. That way you'll be notified of every video that goes up from myself, Xavier Wills at Desktop Bodybuilding. And make sure you check out our newest podcast as well. We have 4 episodes up already, actually 3, and there's going to be one up very soon after this video as well. So make sure you do check that out. The latest episode features myself, Martin Fitzwater and Nathan Diasha, and we also break down this weekend's contest for Mr. Big Evolution Pro there in Portugal as well. So make sure you do check out that episode. And if you do want to check out any of the first episodes, click the link below. That'll take you to the first episode. And then we've got another 2 up as well. So make sure you check it out. But let's get straight into this one. And basically this came across my Instagram page, and I saw IFBB Pro Bob Chick on Instagram, which is Bob Cicherillo, says, VOB podcast is back. I'm calling out Fouad Abiad for his recent comments on his podcast regarding my position as athlete's rep. Bro, ... seriously. So I listened to what Bob said, I headed over to his YouTube channel, checked it out, watched the full video, and I'm going to do a reaction to that. But first, I'm going to actually react to what Fouad Abiad had to say, which is what Bob Cicherillo had an issue with.
The only thing I would say is I wish they had an actual athlete's rep.
That's where I was going when I said
I just
the
wish
involvement.
The only thing I think they have an in-name athlete's rep that doesn't do anything for the athletes.
We need a voice, an actual voice.
Yeah, I wish there was one person that the athletes could go to and actually have a representative that wasn't closer to the IFBB than he was to the athletes.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I would say.
So Fouad has a few good points there, but he does obviously say the way he says it, and that's why Bob's actually done a reaction video on his channel, is, you know, basically saying we should have a real, or whatever terminology he actually just used then, athlete's rep. Now, to me, I mean, I haven't really even known that Bob Cicherillo was still the athlete's rep from a fan perspective, and I follow bodybuilding pretty closely, have a pretty decent knowledge of it. Obviously I was following it back when Bob Cicherillo became the athlete's rep, and I'm only 32, 33 years of age, whatever age I actually am, and I was following him back then. I remember when he became the athlete's rep, because I've been following since I've been 13 years old or whatever it has been. So he said he'd been an athlete's rep for, I think, 15 to 20 years, Bob said. So that coincides. But I remember there was a lot happening back then, and you heard a lot more through the forums and all that sort of stuff. And social media is a so much bigger thing now. But I've never actually really heard in any recent times about Bob being the athlete's rep, or anyone coming to Bob, or being any sort of meeting regarding the athletes or anything like that. So I don't even know if the athletes know that there is an actual athlete's rep.
Sometimes athletes want things like, well, they want a black backdrop at all the shows.
Yep.
Well, it'd be nice for all the athletes to get together and have one guy that can go to them and say, hey guys,
Like a union.
when you're promoting the shows, the guys want to be in front of a black backdrop, or they want, let's try and find a lighting production that can do all the shows so that so that the shows are all lit the same. So like, that's kind of what I mean when they needed a liaison between the two. Mm-hmm. So, but other than that, I had no bad experiences.
You should do that.
No.
I would love to do that.
So Fouad said he'd love to be the athlete's rep. So I think probably a lot of people with Fouad's popularity, a lot of people would probably love that, because Fouad does a lot of things. He runs his own show up there in Canada. He's obviously got the podcast. He's a much bigger name now than he was during his bodybuilding career, which is sort of a surprising thing, because he was a Mr. Olympic competitor, guy that competed at the Arnold's, won pro contests. So it's very interesting that he does say that. And obviously a few, you know, somewhat simple things that he's sort of requesting that I think has sort of, I suppose, been echoed by the athletes as well.
You're asking what we would change, right? The only thing I would say is it would be cool to have the same judges at all the shows, or different judges at all the shows. The same judges at all the shows. I
disagree with that.
Well,
By having the same people constantly win, because the opinions are all the same.
Yeah, I don't
all
like
the time.
that.
Yeah.
Having different judges gives different opinions, and I think that's good.
Yeah, I disagree with Fouad on this one. I agree with most of his other stuff, but this one, I think, you know, the judges should rotate. Now, should they constantly be at the same locations each time and whatever? I don't know. I mean, it's not a big enough sport to be like, okay, we're flying these people in and we're flying these people to this country and all that sort of stuff. It's maybe not quite at that level, and obviously the promoters have to make a profit on these shows as well, or at least break even at worst, and or run an amateur show with it, do an expo, whatever they can do to actually make money, because they put a lot of time and effort into this. If they're not making money and that's their primary job, then obviously they're not going to do it, and they have to pay sanction fees for all these contests and stuff as well. So that's something we need to take into consideration as well. But if they can figure out a way with the federation to make more money, then we can put more money into these contests and make them better, and I suppose allow for all these sorts of, lighting things, stage things, all that sort of stuff. But I'm going to play Bob Cicherillo's response to this right now, and I'm going to react to it as well.
But this is a guy I literally just saw this week. We were at the Orlando Pro, Ed and Betty Pariso's show, the UBU Expo. Saw Fouad and Nick and the rest of the crew at his booth, and went up just like normal and shook hands. I don't know. I didn't know this guy had an issue or a problem with me, but clearly he does.
I don't know if Fouad has a direct problem with Bob Cicherillo, or maybe just what he's done as an athlete's rep. Because we've got to remember, Fouad competed while Bob Cicherillo was the athlete's rep. Maybe he saw nothing was actually happening as an Olympia and an Arnold Classic competitor, as I mentioned, and thought that Bob's maybe not really doing much as an athlete's rep. But we'll go on to listen to the rest of this video.
And first of all, I thought that was pretty. Listen, be a man. If you got an issue or a problem, say something, man. I mean, just don't sit there and make it look like we're friends or we're at least amicable when you got clearly something wrong with your thinking. But
so obviously having a little bit of a dig at Fouad there, saying there's something wrong with his thinking. But yeah, I don't know if Fouad has a direct issue with Bob or not. Maybe he just didn't want to bring it up in that scenario. Maybe he's got a lot of stuff going on, that he was at his booth and all that sort of stuff. And maybe he just doesn't want to bring it up with Bob at all. I don't know. But, questioning his manhood, that's obviously one thing that's going to trigger a lot of people.
First of all, if you're going to refer to me by name. You know who I am, right? So why do you sit there and say things like, oh, well, we have an athlete's rep in name only, but like you don't know who it is, right? Quit acting stupid, man. I mean, it doesn't make you look any smarter or better. It just makes you look silly, okay?
Yeah, I don't think it really makes too much of a difference either way. I mean, obviously, everyone knew who Fouad was talking about, at least who's in the know and knows who potentially the athlete's rep is or was, because I didn't know if Bob Cicherillo still was the athlete's rep, because I hadn't heard much about that in quite a long time.
And then you go on to say, that doesn't do anything for the athletes. Well, first of all, you could Google this stuff, bro. It's all at your hands, okay? I've done nothing. Well, listen, I can give you a whole list of stuff I've done, all right? Well, before you ever turned pro, when you were still up in Canada building snowmen and stuff, all right? We were busy working on getting the athlete's rep because we didn't have one at that time. Actually, it was me who put together the pieces to try to start a union back in the day for the athletes, which I know you guys have mentioned a little bit here and there, but I actually did it. I didn't sit around, not that we had podcasts back then, but in interviews and such, talking about it or waxing about it or bitching about it or complaining about it. You know what I did? I actually did something about it.
So it's cool that Bob did go, and actually do something about it. I remember back in the day on the muscular development forums and a lot of the other forums, Bob talking a lot about this, and Lee Priest and Bob going back and forth, and then Shawn Ray and Lee Priest going back and forth. And I know that Shawn Ray was actually the first athlete's rep as well. Two guys that Lee Priest doesn't like. So I remember seeing a lot about that, and Lee Priest was asking for help with his suspension that he had from the IFB and all that sort of stuff. So Bob actually did do some things for some of the athletes, but I didn't hear much outside of those sorts of things among the forums and stuff where Bob used to post quite a bit.
We got a position at the table as the athlete's rep. Now, that wasn't me at the time. There's a guy named Shawn Ray. I know you don't know your bodybuilding history very much, Fouad, but let me help you out. Shawn Ray was a pretty good bodybuilder back in the day. You may have heard of him. Again, Google's your best friend.
So Bob's definitely having a dig at Fouad there, saying Google's his best friend. He actually goes on to say that he hasn't watched Fouad's podcast, but he hears he does very well. But I'm actually wondering, because obviously Fouad Googles a lot of stuff on his podcast, if Bob actually has watched it.
It's so silly, I don't even want to really spend any time on it, but again, guy shot you down in 2 seconds from the short clip that I saw, disagreeing. No, you want different judges judging you. You don't want the same people over and over and over, even if it was possible logistically. Okay? It's just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. But, maybe you even corrected yourself. I saw you were kind of second guessing your own thing when it came out of your mouth, as the other guys kind of jumped on you on that one. But
I think it's good, though, that Fouad actually goes on there and sounds out these ideas. It's not like he's necessarily thought about all these things exactly and gone, okay, this is my presentation and I'm putting it on the podcast. I like that they can actually sound it out on the podcast, and the fact that, he sort of gets destroyed on some channels for doing that, I don't necessarily agree with, but I do agree that that was probably not the best idea. I would prefer to see different judges at different shows and not the same judges over and over again, because you're going to see the same guys, potentially getting favoured because some judges will like certain physiques. And if you've got 7 judges and they're the same 7 judges for every single show, the bodybuilding community might say this guy never gets a look in. And it might just be 3 of those judges just aren't a fan of his physique. They think maybe it shouldn't be rewarded when perhaps it should be. So I think different judges is definitely the way to go.
Anytime, any place, anywhere you want an open debate about any of these topics, feel free. I'm going to make you look stupid real quick. I can guarantee you that right now. My knowledge of this bodybuilding industry far surpasses yours or anybody you know.
So his knowledge surpasses not only Fouad's, but anyone that Fouad knows. So Fouad basically will know just about everyone in the bodybuilding community. So I think Bob's saying that his knowledge surpasses everyone's at this point. But let me know if you think that's the truth or not.
Unfortunately, a couple of the ideas that you actually said out loud, I got to be honest. If I just put you in place as the athlete's rep and sent you in there for a meeting with the Pro League with Jim Mannion and Big Steve and Sandy and Gary and all the rest of the brass and Tyler, right? And you came up with these ideas, they would literally laugh you out of the meeting room. Like they would say, "Look, we can't take this guy seriously." I mean, just a couple of notes I took from the clip I saw. You want a black backdrop at all the shows. Do you have any idea how impossible that would be?
I don't know if this would be impossible. I really don't think it would be to have a black backdrop at every show. Now, I don't know if Fouad means for the prejudging and finals. He might just mean for prejudging. Who knows? Obviously, you've got to feature sponsors and all that sort of stuff. But a black backdrop, I don't think is impossible.
For many reasons. So you want everybody to just put a black curtain on stage, right? Separate from the backdrop or the $10,000 LED screen that they're using, or the backdrop they spend thousands of dollars for. At some point, you just want to kind of just have the boys set up a little curtain on there, right? Just for the bodybuilding. Do we keep it there for the whole show? It's an extra cost, right? I'm sure you haven't thought of that either, but.
Now, you got to think about this as well, though. Okay, so I've done photography before at pro contests as well, mind you, and there's been backlights. When there are backlights, it makes a photographer, a videographer's job extremely, extremely hard. So the photos come out worse. The athletes don't get looked at as well because those lights coming forward, even to the judges, have to be distracting at least at some level. If you've got a black backdrop, it makes it very, very easy to judge these physiques. We saw that at the Classic Physique Olympia, and I think even the 212 Olympia as well, where we saw that black backdrop at the prejudging, and that was even in an expo hall, I believe, as well. And it was very easy. The guys looked way better. And apparently the lighting there wasn't even good, but the fact that they had a black background made it so much easier and so much better. Now that was at the Olympia, obviously. The Olympia has a lot of money, but to put that black backdrop there, I don't think it would have been a hard job. Now you could have a black backdrop and have the sponsors right at the side. You could zoom out with the cameras for live streams and say, hey, sponsors, you're going to get seen. They're going to be there. Yeah, they won't be right behind the athletes, but who's really looking at those sponsorships right behind the athletes when they're looking at contest photos anyway? You're going to see it more on, video and live streams and all that sort of stuff. I don't think it's that difficult. Yeah, maybe at the prejudging, have the black backdrop, and maybe at finals, introduce some of the other stuff. But if you've got an LED screen that's changing colors especially, and lights and different sponsors' advertisements, and it's directly behind the athletes, and I saw this in pro contests last year, that would be so hard for photographers. I've been at contests where photographers are literally swearing, going, this is ridiculous, I need to turn it off, all that sort of stuff. And it's just so distracting, and it's so hard for fans. The fans, this is the big thing. The fans want to find good photos and good videos so they can actually follow the sport. And they can't find it. So you're really hurting your own brand by not at least having some sort of rules and regulations for these promoters and saying, hey, if you've got a LED screen, turn it on in between competitors. That's fine, whatever, that's all good. Or maybe just say it's got to be off to the side a little bit. So it's not, behind certain athletes. And then you can bring it in for, whatever the finals. But just the way it is right now, it makes it very hard to actually even follow the sport at this point.
The same lighting at shows. I mean, come on, man. Like, seriously? You want the same guy to do the same lighting at every show? Every show should have the same lighting. Listen, again, clearly you've never put on a show. Clearly you have not 1 ounce of experience in producing and putting on a show and promotion. Zero. Because you would know immediately. All the promoters right now who are watching this are laughing their ass off, going, does he have any idea what he's talking about? Well, the answer is clearly no.
Well, that makes Bob not look the best, because Fouad Abiad has his own show, the Fouad Abiad Classic, I think it's called. It's up there in Canada. He runs a very good show. He looks like he puts on a great stage production. I believe he does a black backdrop as well. So, yeah, Fouad Abiad definitely does have experience in terms of promoting shows. So he knows what he's talking about in that regard. So I've got to give it to Fouad on that one.
You couldn't have the same lighting at every show for 100 reasons, but I'll just give you a couple. Every venue is different. Theater lighting is different than lighting in an open expo, that you have to bring in outside lighting and set it up, okay? Air, space, all makes a difference. Existing lighting, ambient lighting.
Now, I totally agree with Bob. You're not going to be able to get the same lighting at every venue. And bodybuilding isn't big enough to say, okay, every contest has to be in a theater or it has to be in this sort of thing or whatever. So I totally get that. The lighting isn't going to be the same everywhere. But if you paid one guy in the United States who was a lighting specialist, and Bob did mention this, that he said that the guy that did the Ironman, I can't remember his name, actually did it in an expo hall, and he said the lighting was never the same. Now, it might not be the same, but you can still get a high level of lighting where you can have certain variables be similar. Now, expo halls are tough because there is light coming from every single angle, and I know that that's going to be very, very tough to actually light properly. But if you have the same guy doing all the contests, at least a lot of the shows will have very, very similar lighting. So I think that that's actually a good idea from Fouad Abiad.
The list goes on and on and on of things I've done for the athletes, but you wouldn't know that. Well, apparently, maybe you think you do, because you said, I don't do anything for the athletes. I'm just in name only.
Now, Bob does actually go on to mention in this video, which I haven't included in here. He has done a lot of things in terms of, helping the athletes, getting more money for the Olympia, all that sort of stuff in terms of prize money, introducing 3 new divisions, coming up with the guidelines for them and all that sort of stuff. So I think that stuff's great if he's done that, for sure. And he mentions he's been the athletes rep for about 20 odd years. But I think the athletes want to see a few other things that they're sort of asking for over and over again, but don't seem like incredibly hard requests, perhaps.
You also say that you need an athlete's rep, or you would like to see one, that's closer to the athletes than the federation. Well, again, let me just take you one more step back in history, okay? The reason that Shawn didn't last as the athlete's rep was because he had absolutely no relationship at all with the federation. And then back then, it was a guy named Wayne D'Amelia, okay? They didn't like each other very much. And because of that, absolutely nothing got done. Nothing.
Now, Shawn Ray and Wayne D'Amelia, 2 super divisive characters. Obviously, they're not going to get on because Shawn Ray is going to want the best for the athletes, and Wayne D'Amelia is trying to put on, he did put on good shows, but he's obviously looking out for the federation. So, 2 divisive characters trying to do that, it's just not going to work out. You need someone, I think, a bit more mild-mannered, probably on both sides, to be honest, but that's just my opinion.
So Shawn, knowing that nothing was going to get accomplished in his role as athlete's rep, decided to step down, and I was put in his place. Now, I had an excellent relationship with the powers that be, especially with Jim Mannion, who I've known since I was a kid, and, all the top judges, and Sandy and Steve and everybody else, right? So I actually did get things done.
I think it's great that Bob has a good relationship with Jim Mannion, the federation, a lot of the top judges, all that sort of stuff. I think it's awesome. Obviously, he MCs a lot of shows as well, so a lot of the promoters are people that are sort of in power within the IFB. That's great. But he's very close with a lot of those people inside the IFB and the federation, and actually seems like he's actually really tight and good friends with a lot of those people. So obviously they're going to be looking out for the federation and everything like that. It's a business, obviously. I understand that. They're trying to make money, but the athletes sort of want someone who can go to them, or they can go to at least anyway, and then they can actually put their point forward. But I think that's the main issue there.
Be man enough to bring these things to my attention. Listen, my number's not hard to get. Again, I just saw you face to face, and you had nothing to say. Zero. Then you go back to your little podcast and you want to start talking shit, right? I don't find that to be a man. I mean, again, I don't know what your problem is. Again, I've never had an issue with you. I thought we were good. But again, I will welcome this anytime. You want to invite me on your podcast to debate you or any of your experts?
Experts in quotations there, but Bob obviously wants to, either go on Fouad's podcast, have an open debate, all that sort of stuff. He mentions it several times in this video as well, and obviously about to get his following up a little bit as well on YouTube.
Or any of that thing, or just have a civil discussion about why some of the things that you come up with is so ridiculous that it's not even worth bringing to the pro. I would be embarrassed to bring some of these things to the pro league. Okay, that's how bad it is.
I don't think there's anything that Fouad brought up that you would actually be embarrassed to bring to the pro league, unless you're talking about that there should be the exact same judges at every show, because obviously there's shows in Europe, Australia, well, not Australia right now, New Zealand, America, South America, Canada, all that sort of stuff. So to have the same 7 judges at all of them is just not realistic. Obviously, there's so many pro contests. You got to remember all the divisions as well, because there is pro contests and multiple pro contests just about every weekend. So that's just not realistic whatsoever. But all the other stuff, the lighting, the having a black backdrop or some sort of plain black backdrop that makes it easier for photographers, for fans to see photos and all that sort of stuff, because I feel like there's too many variables right now. And I think it does make it probably harder for the judges. I don't know for a fact, but I've judged shows where there's distracting stuff in the background, or at least been a spectator, and I've been like, whoa, this is quite hard to actually judge the physique correctly and properly. And, at big shows, there's a lot of money on the line. And we saw it at the Olympia last year. There was all those strobe lights and crazy lights while the competitors were on stage flashing behind them, which I understand wanting to do a good stage production, but it does get very distracting as well. Then Fouad had a response through his Instagram page and said, you can make videos about me, you can write articles about me, but none of it matters. People have been doing it since the podcast took off 2 years ago, and it's par for the course. What matters to me most is the people in my life and who care about me, and the fans who support and benefit from my efforts. If I say something out of line or do something out of line, it's never malicious and never for views. I'm online 6 hours a week and I make mistakes just like anyone else. The difference is these media outlets make it their job to bend and flip comments to make them seem evil and contrived. I really hate what bodybuilding media has become. There was a time when magazines were media and they made great efforts to make the athletes look good. It seems the popular thing in media now is to call out all the bad traits of athletes and bodybuilding. It's really fucking sad. What these outlets don't realize is the more they push me, the harder I work. It's a losing proposition, but I enjoy watching them squirm and try their hardest. Now, I want to go to some of the comments on Instagram and also on YouTube as well to give you an idea of what the fans and what the top names like Phil Heath, Shawn and a bunch of others are actually thinking on this topic. Blessing Waterloo jumped on there and commented on Bob Cicherillo's post and said, you know what I think? Bob Chick and Fouad Abiad should have a boxing match. Would love to see that. And George Farah said, I don't think Fouad Abiad means any harm, bro. He just wants more listeners, that's all. Not too long ago, he also told Blessing at Waterloo that I never did anything in the sport as a coach and I always take people with names. I guess when I helped you, Bob, win the USA overalls, you were a big name. It's all good. Still love him. No hard feelings. We are all family after all. And Phil Heath replies to George Farah and says, George Farah _guru, no, George, don't speak for other grown men as we don't. And Phil Heath responds and says, no, George Farah, don't speak for another grown man as we don't know his intentions. Let them speak as men together as we can't assume anything. Yes, we are all in the sport together, but people must be accountable to higher standards if they expect to be taken seriously. Bob continues to do his part and should be acknowledged for it. Either way, it's not about respect, it's about disrespect, and it can only be sorted through adult conversations, probably offline. I wish them all the best in finding clarity, peace, and understanding. Then George responds and says, at Phil Heath, I agree, but you know me better. I love everyone and just want us all to get along. So I don't think anything that George Farah said was wrong whatsoever. And Bob Chick responded and said, at George Farah, that's just plain silliness, brother. So I don't know if he's talking about the coaching part and he only coaches big names or what the actual part of he's actually responding to there. Then Shawn replies to the post and says, at Bob Chick, what did I miss here in the peanut gallery? More podcast misinformation that needs a guy from the 80s, 90s, 2000s to clarify things related to bodybuilding versus a guy who's been around 10 years or so. A heap of laughing faces. Nice work, Chick. Then put hashtag classy, which I find interesting. And Phil Heath comments on the main post and said, please tell me you didn't say he didn't do anything, Bob Chick. Oh boy, well, I guess class is in session. Then Buys and Tries, they posted it up as well, and Lee Priest comments on there, says Bob's no reps for the athletes. Bob is a rep for Bob and the IFB, not the athletes. Bob's out for Bob. And there's a whole bunch of other comments as well, and it seems like about 80% maybe, at a guess. I'll actually put up a poll as well after this. It seems like 80% are actually with Fouad Abiad on this one. Maybe they don't totally agree with everything Fouad said, but it seems like people are sort of siding with Fouad, if anything, by the comments that I'm seeing, not only on Instagram, but also under Bob's video as well. Then on YouTube, I highlighted a few comments as well. This guy here says, do these athletes know about you being an athlete's rep? And then I went to a comment on Instagram from Joel Thomas, who's qualified for the 2022 Mr. Olympia. It says, raise your hand if you're a pro. We've no idea we had an athlete's rep. And then he put a little raised hand thing, so he had no idea. Then Brad Baker says, honestly didn't know Bob was the rep, always thought he was an IFB employee. And that sort of highlights it a little bit more of what I was saying before. It's, from the outside looking in, to the athletes as well, it seems like Bob is super tight with the federation. He obviously MCs the Olympia, MCs tons of shows, does all that sort of stuff. So it does seem like Bob is, an employee of the IFB, even if he isn't directly. He's employed by, the show promoters and all that sort of stuff. Then the lighting was brought up as well, and Bob responded and said, good lighting is always a top concern, and for most promoters do a fine job of making it happen. Now, I sort of disagree. This last couple of years, I've seen worse and worse lighting at some of these shows, and I think a lot of it's got to do with those backdrops and also the very poor lighting from the back of the stage. So I think if we can get some sort of standard of lighting, I know obviously there's so many variables, but I think that would definitely help the federation. And then there's a ton of comments on there as well. So anyway, I want you guys to let me know what you think in the comments below about all of this. Was Fouad wrong for actually calling out Bob Cicherillo, saying he does basically nothing as an athlete's rep? And was Bob's response warranted, I guess? He had a lot of things to say about Fouad. He went pretty in-depth and went pretty hard, to be honest with you guys. And what do you think about what Phil Heath, Shawn Ray, and George Farah said in the comments below as well? And let me know where you stand on it all as well. Should there be more done for the athletes? Should there be a different athlete's rep? Should Bob be the athlete's rep? Should they run it differently? Let me know your thoughts on all of it in the comments below as well. So that's it for this video, guys. For Xavier Wills, Desktop Bodybuilding, we are out.